With analysis of the peace plan and his thoughts on the Secretary Pompeo interview, I'm joined by Middle East expert and former advisor to the president, Dr. Walid Phares. He joins us from Florida. Walid, this plan has been seen by many as favorable to Israel, but not so much to the Palestinians. Now, as mentioned by the secretary there, this is a first offer. What do you expect the Palestinian counteroffer to look like?
Well, first of all, it's very important to understand that as a first offer, it calls for a counteroffer. That's the philosophy of the whole plan of the deal of the century. It's a plan in the making, in progress. I've spoken with actually advisors to President Abbas in 2016, 2017. They were expecting something like that, maybe not the map that was showed by the president, but they had concerns, obviously, about the whole process. And I think that this first deal ensured, at least on the map, two things. Number one, Israel was concerned about security. It got this border in the map that would separate Israel from Jordan. The Palestinians were very concerned, and I heard them telling me this many times, about the link between the West Bank and Gaza. Guess what? A tunnel was offered. It's an unhinged tunnel. I mean, you could use it, and there is no problem with it. Right. But of course, the other issues will have to be discussed: refugees, Jerusalem, and many other matters.
Right. Right. Well, let's talk about that. Now, the maps of this plan have been drawn up by the U.S. and Israel, basically. And as you mentioned, they don't give the Palestinians everything they wanted. There is a proposed West Bank Gaza tunnel, but the Jordan Valley, the Israelis would get control of. There's no East Jerusalem capital here. Actually, it's in Abu Dis, which is about a mile outside of Jerusalem. Is that a deal breaker for the Palestinians?
It is ideologically, but then when the Palestinian negotiators or people in government will take a look at it and will understand that they will have an administrative capital in a suburb which is attached to Jerusalem called Abu Dis, but something else. They're going to get Arab neighborhoods inside East Jerusalem. So the idea that they're not getting East Jerusalem, they're getting part of East Jerusalem. And by putting those two parts together, they have an administrative capital. Let me mention one thing. Egypt is moving its administrative capital from Cairo. People wouldn't believe this, to 100 miles away because of practical considerations. So at the end, they will have a capital. It will be connected to Jerusalem, but not to all of Jerusalem.
Now, some critics are saying, you mentioned it a moment ago, the refugees are not settled in this plan. But we have to point this out, and I think it's critical, because I've been hearing about this for so long, Walid, so very long, that this is the first time that Israel is accepting a Palestinian state, and we shouldn't dismiss that. How big a deal is that for the Palestinian territories?
It's probably less important than Jerusalem because of the high symbolism of Jerusalem. But at the same time, if they are attentive to what has been offered was not you bring the refugees first, there will be chaos, and then you create a state. You create a state first to which the refugees will be coming to, and of course they will have many options. Some would like to settle in other places, some would like to emigrate, but those who really want to come and join the Palestinian state, they have to have a Palestinian state. And once it is established, then there are those billions and billions of dollars to help them settle in the new Palestinian state.
Well, I want to show you the reaction in the Palestinian territories to the plan. They don't look very happy here, Walid. You see the rioting in the streets and the burning of things. Yet Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, the Emirates, they're all urging Palestine to come to the table. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas yesterday sent a letter to the Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel saying, quote, "The plan is an American and Israeli disavowal of the Oslo Accords." And so the Palestinian Authority now sees itself as free to disregard the agreements with Israel, including security cooperation. Could this plan destabilize the region, and should they come to the table?
First, these are the first reactions, and they were expected, of course. But let's understand one thing. You have two types of Palestinian politicians. Those who will never accept neither this plan or this map or any other map, these are the Hamas camp. And the Hamas camp is linked to whom? To Iran and to Hezbollah. That's a different story. But then you have the Palestinian mainstream of Mr. Abbas, and in the beginning he's going to reject that. But of course he's going to negotiate and talk with whom? With those who support him in the Arab world. You just mentioned the most important ones. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Jordan to a certain extent, but of course you see Oman and Bahrain. So when Arab coalition partners will meet with the Palestinians and will guarantee them that they're going to be with them in the development of that new Palestinian state, they will start moving in a different direction. Now they are concerned about who? Who is the concern of Mahmoud Abbas? Hamas. Because they're going to accuse him of being a traitor to the Palestinian cause, so on and so forth. Look, let me give you one example from history. Ireland, it did not jump from under British colonialism to an independent state immediately and sovereign state. It went through phases. And the Palestinians have a great model in how the Irish people have moved along to obtain their independence.
There are economic incentives, as you mentioned earlier, for the Palestinians to make this plan work. $50 billion to fund Palestinian infrastructure for jobs, etc. Now, many Palestinians are saying this is an insult. Is it?
No, because many Palestinian businessmen I met in 2016 and 2017, guess what they were trying to tell me? Why wouldn't the United States be granting donations to the next Palestinian state? So those who are in charge of the economy were seeking this, but at the same time, the radicals will do everything they can to sink the whole process. And besides, $40 billion, Raymond, does it suggest something? It's almost a third of the Iran deal money, $150 billion,
right,
for a very small piece of land, versus Iran, $150 billion. I would recommend that the Palestinians will reconsider and then will engage in the negotiations. Not easy. It's going to take some time, but the base exists. I would seize that opportunity.
One of the precursors to acknowledging the statehood of Palestine is to control Hamas, disavow Hamas and disarm it. Can the Palestinians exert that kind of control over Hamas?
Look, I have been pushing for that matter and advising for that matter for the last many years, both lawmakers and, of course, leaders. Without getting the PA, the Palestinian Authority, with the backing of the Arabs to control Gaza, Gaza is the coastal area of the new Palestine, Palestinian state. You cannot fly with Palestine without having Gaza. So yes, there need to be a dissolution of the armed forces. I'm not talking about political parties. They're free, even if they are Islamists. That is crucial. The problem is, to resolve this, you have to go all the way, guess to where? To Tehran. Tehran has the key, because Tehran is funding and training Hamas. Hezbollah is training and funding Hamas. So what we have been doing with our Arab partners was to resolve the issue there, and that would have great consequences on the Palestinian issue.
I want to ask you about, it's a little bit of a political question. Your thoughts on why people in Middle America, why should they be concerned about this peace in the Middle East? And why is the president expending so much effort, years, to try to bring these sides together with this deal?
Well, in a post-9/11 era, in a post-ISIS era, in a different world after the Cold War, the jihadi attacks against the United States, you cannot ignore what is happening in the Middle East. You can ignore, but then suffer the consequences. And what we're going to do is do it at the lesser price possible in terms of people's lives and treasure at the same time. So if we help resolve this issue, if we help resolve some of the other issues that are pending in the region, I would say, Raymond, that this is not the only big deal that we are going to be cutting in the Middle East. This is the first one. Look at what's happening in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, the minorities issues, the Kurdish issues. This is just the first model. If we are successful there, we may be successful elsewhere.
I want to talk about a couple of other matters. You heard Secretary Pompeo and I discuss his trip to London. Now, he's asked the Brits to reconsider that decision to allow the Chinese company Huawei to build their 5G network. Might they reconsider? Should they?
I think they should. I think we are their strategic partners, especially now after Brexit more than ever before. But that reminds me of what happened with the British and the Europeans with regard to the Iran deal. You remember President Trump spent a lot of time also convincing them that we cannot stay in the Iran deal because it's a threat to our security. But you guys have economic and financial interests, your companies, at the end of the day. So something very close is happening now with Huawei. We consider that the Chinese will use Huawei, and I think that's a good argument to do intelligence on us and our allies. And in Britain, of course, you have financial interests with these companies. But with time, I think the British, especially this government, will understand that it's much better to be in line with their allies, the United States, who are always there at their side when there are strategic security problems. So it's going to take dialogue between us and the British to resolve the matter.
Before I let you go, I just want to focus once more on this peace plan. They're calling it the plan of the deal of the century. It is the first time, it seems to me, that Israel is willing to accept a Palestinian state. This is the two-state solution in many ways that people have been asking for. Your thoughts on why it took so long and how Trump could be uniquely positioned to bring it to some sort of completion?
Couple of points quickly, Raymond. What is unique about it is that what we've heard from one part of Israel, the left-wing Labor government in the past, they have accepted two-state solution, while the Likud and the right wing have never accepted that. So now President Trump was able to convince those who were not convinced. So now he has Israel united, at least around the idea of two-state solution. And number two, the Israelis have an interest in resolving the matter because they and the Arab coalition have a much greater threat coming to both of them from Iran. The president encouraged the Arabs to drive terrorism out, is encouraging Israelis and Palestinians to find a resolution because all of us, we are going to be heading towards a massive challenge with the Iranians, and that challenge has started already on the ground in Iraq.
Well, as I mentioned to the Secretary, this looks a lot like Isaac Rabin's plan right before he was assassinated. This is sort of the plan he had proposed with the Palestinians.
That's absolutely true. I have been in the Middle East and here for many decades. The plan existed, different maps maybe, but this is the definitive map. Let me say one last word. The map reflects demographics on the ground. There is no cheating here. This is where the Palestinians live. This is where the Israelis live. This is the best way to put it together. But again, the Palestinians have the right and should be very aggressive in negotiating, but they should negotiate.
We'll leave it there. Dr. Walid Phares, thank you so much for joining us. And you can follow Walid over at Twitter at Walid Phares.